To the orange stage here at ETL 2021, the world's only hybrid technology show. Thank you very much for joining us, to those people that are in the room and those people that are watching online. We're here today for our next session with Brian and Heather, which I'm sure is going to be an incredibly engaging session. But before we get there, I just wanted to do a couple of bits of housekeeping, as I've been doing all day. So if you've heard it before, apologies. The headsets that you're wearing at the moment, if we can just ask that once the session's finished, you leave those on the seat of the chair, and we'll make sure those are sanitized and cleaned before the next session. We will also be using Glisser to run our Q&A session during this session. So if any of you have any questions that you'd like to pose either from in the room or from online, then you can access that in a number of ways. Probably the easiest one for those people that are in the room today is to scan the QR code, which is just over my left-hand shoulder, and that'll give you the opportunity to raise questions as we go through. You can also access that via the direct URL at glsr.live/ETL21. If you are watching online, there's a little plus button in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. If you click on that, it will pop up and you can raise your questions that way. So, all that remains for me to do is to introduce Brian and Heather. I'll let them tell you who they are and what they do, but we're really looking forward to this session. So thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Holtz-Knudsen. I am the CEO and founder of H2K Partners. We are a boutique consulting firm that focuses on growth for the marketplace ecosystem, which I define as events, B2B media, marketplaces, communities, etc.
My name is Brian Scott, and I'm the founder and president of Cleartone Consulting. I provide a specialty in event technology, technology consultation, and based out of Maryland.
Oh, and I'm from Sarasota, Florida. Don't be jealous. So we're here today to talk to you about how digital has changed the business world. And we're actually going to do something interesting and have a discussion based on actually how Brian and I met. So I'm a data freak. I love data. I think data is very powerful and a huge asset. And you had written a blog, I think, on LinkedIn, and I connected with you.
That's right.
And we just, I think, had an hour-long talk, and we ended up becoming business partners.
Right. And so we've had several of those conversations, and we thought, these are very impactful, we thought. A lot of information. So we thought, why don't we recreate those conversations with visuals, and that's what we're going to do here.
All right, let's go. So before COVID hit, the world was already changing rapidly. Everything from digital natives demanding a B2C experience, inspire, excite, delight me, personalized experiences. How are you speaking to me versus the collective group? You also had changes in behavior in terms of B2B purchasing, which is 80%, or actually, Luke, you were talking about this today, I think 80% or plus are utilizing the web to do their purchasing before they even contact a vendor. And the change, it's faster, it's cheaper, it's actually more information. And so it really was already happening. And the events industry was unfortunately kind of ignoring that. As you could see with Informa selling off all of its media assets and stuff. But anyway, did you, in terms of the change, you have anything to add to that, Brian?
Well, it's just, the change all started, if you want to go to the next slide, all really started with, it has begun prior to COVID, but then COVID just kicked it into full force, right?
Yeah.
Overnight. In fact, I think, I'm not sure where we got this phrase, but we heard the decade in days, right? A change of decades in a matter of days. And so obviously everyone knows that COVID changed the world, right? And keep clicking forward. But it changed it in very interesting ways. Not only how we work and how we communicate, but things that we never thought would actually just go online. We were surprised to find, hey, that really works well online. Doctor's appointments, guess what? They're going to stay online largely. Court, they're actually holding court online, and they're still continuing in that in some locations and going to continue that. So it's made a permanent change in how we do business.
Absolutely. And we like to call this the event organizer under pressure, right? It is in 24 hours. It was March 11th. I'll never forget it. I was in New York City with one of our large clients, and literally the world shut down. And all of a sudden events just started canceling. And for an event, for a business whose sole revenue streams are relying on face-to-face, this was obviously devastating.
Yeah, dramatic to say the least, right?
So events end, they halt, but these event organizers don't have digital skills. They are misaligned internally, and they were misaligned with the, how their customers needed to be, worked with the delivery. The financial pressure was obviously monumental, and I mean, what we saw was massive execution without any strategy. It was just like such a desperate move to get a virtual platform, and it's basically trying to fit that what is it, the square peg in the
round
circle,
hole,
right?
And they've been struggling really to get the time to create strategies even since then. So many of them are still really operating without a really sound strategy.
Absolutely. And the other part that we saw was, and I don't know why this is not working. Well, this is the Black Swan.
It is a Black Swan event, right?
Yeah.
And if you're familiar with that, it really means it's an event that is very rare and just changes the entire game, right? And keep flicking forward there if you would. And it's digital first, and that's really the big shift. There was digital before, but it wasn't first, really. And so now, even though face-to-face is coming back, and everyone's very excited about that, and it's always going to remain. I mean, face-to-face is never going to go away. But now, all of a sudden, it's just one particular channel in a 365 strategy that's got to be there that actually has far more contact points digitally, right?
Right.
So that's why it's digital first.
And actually, we call this the new never normal. It is, the pace of change is so rapid. Your business is changing every single day. And what has happened is, because customers who used to sponsor events, and they're coming back, but because they had the experience with digital and the data that comes along with it, event organizers are going to be under severe pressure to deliver a much richer product in terms of the engagement, the data.
Right.
And you were talking about that on that LinkedIn post.
Right. And there's, there was already probably more data than most organizers really knew how to deal with prior to this shift. Yeah. Now, with everything going digital so quickly, there's literally like 100 times more data than they really know. So the problems that existed before are amplified. They're even bigger now, right? So we're just everyone knows this, but this is laying the groundwork for what needs to happen, right?
Well, does this look familiar? So one of the things that is so aggravating is that event technology companies have basically missed a big critical component, and that is integration, right? The ability to integrate.
I mean, this represents the way this industry works. It's all a bunch of individual bubbles, all of themselves, and of course it kind of leaves the onus often on the event organizer, like how am I going to deal with these data sets? And what happens when you have disparate data sets like this and everything's disconnected? It's a picture we know well.
Absolutely. And I think what happens, and from one of my experiences, is if I have to log in to all different platforms and my data is different here and from there, or I'm an exhibitor and I have leads in this and I have leads in that, this is a real pain. It's very inefficient, and it really makes me mad. So I come to the event mad.
Well, it makes it impossible to really do business the way event organizing companies ought to be doing business, right? It's really a barrier to that.
Absolutely, and the revenue lost, attendees lost, everyone talking about butts in seats, the engagement. Like, there's so much missed opportunity by not having your data house in order and having a single source of the truth.
A story about that is, like, does it really frustrate attendees? I mean, they still come. Well, recently I was registered for an event. I won't tell you what event. I was already registered. I was a speaker at that event, right? And I received an email about, hey, wouldn't you like to come to this event? From the event organizer, right? I'm thinking, I'm speaking there, right? You should know this about me, right? So yes, it was a little frustrating.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. So people have to wake up and not be asleep behind the wheel.
Yeah.
And really think about what's important to them in terms of KPIs, but really focus on the single source of the truth.
So how do we get there? Everyone's talked about that a lot, and it does take a lot of work. Where there are two key things that I think are very, very important. And one is, I believe, or we believe, through our discussions, that event organizers have to come to the realization that they are event tech companies. Now you're thinking, wait a minute, no, we're an organization, an event organization, or we're an industry vertical, or we're a services company. Think about LinkedIn or even Facebook. Those are classified as event tech companies. There's no doubt about it. You go up and that's what it is. LinkedIn is an event tech company, right? No one would doubt that. Well, what do? They're creating connections between people. They're helping people meet other people. They're providing information about things and people, and they're selling information in ways about things and people. Well, that business model sounds pretty familiar, right? That's often the events business.
Well, this fact you may already know, but Facebook's core revenue stream is actually their data. It's not the advertising, it's this data which they are masters at. And from an event organizer standpoint, their product is the data. And there's actually a huge amount of monetization that could take place if they have the data correct and actionable.
So that's why it's such a broken model, because if the data is truly the core of the value, and they're really actually tech companies, but yet data seems to be one of the most screwed up things in our industry, like that's not going to jive in the right way. Right?
Absolutely.
And you certainly can't do this.
No, you cannot do any personalized messaging. I always hone on the personalization just because I think it's so important, and especially with that next generation they do not listen to branding, they do not engage with advertising, they follow the leader, they follow their friends. The community marketing that Glean does, for example, is going to be awesome for this next generation, but you have to personalize it. It cannot feel like just a general message.
Right, and there's very little of that actually going on. And I understand why. I mean, it's very, very difficult when your data is so confused. And so if the event organizers have the responsibility of understanding and acting like a technology company, then what about the vendors? What's their responsibility? Because they're culpable in all of this mess as well, right? And that is, there's a model that's already out there that perfectly demonstrates what we're talking about, and it's on the SaaS, consumer side of the model. They've created a data exchange ecosystem out there. Every SaaS product that's on the consumer side that comes to the market does so not only with their feature and functionality, but they do it with a very mature API that's well documented, easy to use, event driven. So things that like Zapier can exist and easily, without technology people involved, be able to move data between any platform. So you guys use HubSpot, right, with H2K. So what do you look for in a new platform?
I will not even look at features and functions. I go to integrations first. And if they don't integrate with HubSpot, my QuickBooks, ADP for payroll, whatever, we won't buy it. We just can't. Because I only want one source of truth. I don't want to enter things in differently or have a company be ABC Inc. here and ABC over there. So I think that integration part, and especially with organizers with reduced staff, less resources, this is huge. They also don't want to be working with multiple platforms in terms of the work effort. So I can't express how important this part is. And so event organizers need to demand integrations from our capabilities from their vendors and their partners, and the event tech, you guys just got to step up to the plate.
Yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of customers that are struggling with their data, and I go to their vendors and say, hey, we need to get some data. And the state of the API world in the site is immature. I would just call it as immature, right?
There's actually another thing that we haven't even touched on, which is the security. And I mean, downloading Excel sheets to go upload back in, download from registration, upload into whatever system, that's insane.
Yeah.
Totally dangerous.
Well, that's a three-pronged issue right now. So there's security, privacy, and ownership. Those are all kind of unknowns. And most event organizers, again, how do they approach that? They'll come to an event tech platform and they'll say, hey, are you guys secure? And they say, yes, we are. And they go, okay. And they check that and they say, hey, do you guys follow GDPR? And they say, yes, we do. And they go, okay. And that's about, and I'm being a little facetious, but that's about as deep as it gets. It's a much more complex issue, right? And as soon as someone takes the data out of the event tech platform in Excel platforms and then passes it around through email and then sends it over to the IT group so they can have, well, you've just really blown all of that security out of the water anyway, right?
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
So, why is this taking so long?
Yeah, it is. There's a delay in there.
There's okay. So, where does all this lead to? What an event organizer needs to think about in terms of value, right, with the data, is to provide their audience with what we like to call a vision to decision approach, right? Start the conversation early and stay there on the vendor side, because you want to be that place they go to when they're looking to purchase things or investigate or figure something out. And this is actually becoming more important because You have a lot of this whole thing, I don't know if you've been reading about first-party data versus third-party data, and a lot of changes happening with caching information, but first-party data is actually now becoming very important and very, very valuable, right? And you can do things like purchase intent based off of the things that are happening on your website or in a community, what they're looking at and what they're saving. But this is
I've always really liked this phrase, which I think this is your phase, right? Vision to decision. Explain, what's the definition of that, really? How would you say, what does that really mean?
It's basically taking someone through the purchase funnel, right? The pipeline.
And continuously with them, right? And contact points, right?
And not just a person, I would say a buying team, right? Many times, the more complex the solutions you're selling, the more buyers there are. So you would utilize that, and face-to-face has a spot at the table, for sure. It's just a different spot, and it needs to be part of that journey. And it can be also virtual, too.
Right. This is one of your favorites, I think.
That's my favorite. Bold leadership. I think one of the most frustrating things for me as a consultant, who I've been an operator and founder of B2B media companies and events, is walking in, hearing all of the complaining and griping about how they need to do this and that, talking digital, and the CEO is just so far out and gone in terms of how important this is, and it really kind of is terrifying now. It's like it's going to ruin the company. It has to start at the top. And when you hear stats like 3% of CEOs go visit customers, you've got to really, and I would say the events industry, that is the ivory tower, exists and is here. Its leadership has to change. They have to sit at the table with your customers. You have to sit at the table with your teams. You got to roll up your sleeves and understand what this digital journey is going to take and what the value is going to be back to the company. And the investments have to be made, and they have to be bold enough also to go to their boards and get rid of this notion of 40% profit margins. That money has to go into digital investment.
Well, I'm going to, and the spin on this that I want to look at is in the U.S., so many exhibitions are by trade associations, right? And I believe that what we're going to see between now and the next 3 to 4 years is a massive disruption in that. And the reason being is because if everything's changing faster and an organization is required to be more agile than they've ever been, that is not the definition of the business model of a trade association today in the U.S. We've engaged with several different associations who seem to be very interested and eager on some part of our consultation, right? But then the process starts, going to the board, coming back, then going out to RFP, coming back. It could take 6, 7, 8 months for decisions to be made with that model. That used to be fine when it was only face-to-face world and all of this other digital first didn't exist. That's just not going to fly today.
No, and actually speed or lack thereof is your worst enemy today. We say go fast, but don't break things. You're going to get killed if you don't.
Yeah, no doubt.
So, now I think there's a lot of technology companies in here, but which side do you want to be on?
Right.
I personally want to be on the winning side.
The winning side. And the winning side's probably going to be the agile company, someone who's a part of the data ecosystem, event organizers that understand their role as technology providers and technology companies. That's the winning side.
Yep.
The
So,
losing side is probably the way it used to be a year ago, and if you think that's going to operate for you.
well, actually also the whole competition, the field has just expanded. Anyone can do a virtual event now.
Right.
And I always like to tell everyone the corporate event marketing area is a huge opportunity for event tech companies.
Yeah.
All right, so if you would like, we're going to show you how this looks all on a board, but just if you want to request this slide that I'm going to show you, just go to our website, h2kpartners.co/contact. And also, we want to thank Kingman Inc. They are awesome. If you ever want to, for your own events, they actually will come live with you and will write and draw as you're speaking.
So how's it all look all together?
I'm moving it.
There it is.
There you go.
That's the entire journey.
That's kind of how it feels.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Any questions?
Time for questions. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. There are a few questions on Glisser, so if it's all right with you, I'm just going to run through them.
Sure.
Okay.
one by one, and yeah, feel free to answer them between you. If anyone in the room does have any other questions, or anyone watching online, Glitter is the right platform to submit those. glsr.live/ETL21. The first question, do you think the future of engagement is in face-to-face, hybrid, or virtual?
It's omni-channel. It's all of the above. There is, I don't think there is it's everything.
Right.
I mean,
But the successful future of everything in omnichannel is wholly dependent on having your data in-house, in order, and having that one version of the truth, right? So we've just complicated the channels with more of them, and which is complicating that data system. So really, to be successful with all of those, that's what it's going to take. Right?
Thank you. You actually mentioned, Heather, during the speech that a lot of event organisers, as we sit today, have fewer staff than they probably had at the start of the pandemic, and obviously opportunity means they may come back, but they're not there at the moment. So, what are the best ways that events businesses can streamline their operations with those fewer staff? And it's really pertinent in the events world as we sort of sit today.
I would say one is obviously get your event tech stack in order. Go less versus more applications. I would say that having your data in order. I know we keep beating that horse, but you have less work to do if you have data that's correct.
Yeah.
And I think you need to do a digital acceleration, a vision mapping and roadmap as how you are going to move your company forward. Because if you have revenue coming in from digital, from events, you actually have to do a little less, to be honest. You're not so reliant on a very unscalable face-to-face model. Yeah.
I'll add to that I think, my advice to a company that is struggling financially because of the things that have happened, but they're wanting to move forward, is to simplify the tech stack. And I think they had the luxury before when money was coming in. We can have a lot more different tech. Now they were struggling with the data still, but that's all right. But they kept filling all of these niche needs for everyone with all of these different with different solutions. If they need to streamline, then minimize the number of solutions you have, simplify your approach to the market, and get through this. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually, I wanted to say one other thing. When you look for partners, event technology partners, definitely look for the ones that really truly get the business model. Okay, and there are many tech companies that don't. And what I mean that is that it's the marketplace ecosystem, and there are multiple stakeholders. They have to get attendees. They have to understand, like if you're doing hosted buyer, that's actually another stakeholder on top of the attendees. You have sponsors, you have the event organizer, you have speakers. All of those things make up this business model. And on top of it, which is why this makes this industry complex and exciting, is your event tech company has to understand how your revenue stream, your exhibitor sponsors, sell to those attendees. And if they don't get that, go away.
Lovely, thank you. There's a really great question at the bottom. I'm just going to a follow-up that's just come up to that last question. How do you best solve that leadership issue in this space?
You fire them.
Get new ones.
You get a new one and go look for somebody. Here's another problem with leadership and culture is that if you don't get vision, leadership, culture done, it doesn't matter how much money you spend on event technology, and you will not be able to execute. And in fact, I think that's a very big problem on the association side. You're also, with the labor shortage, you will not attract top talent. And in fact, that's a problem with associations. I don't mean to be a jerk about it, but it's really, they're not attractive to people who are up here. So it's really critical. This is a very big issue.
Perfect. The next question, obviously you're joining us from the States, and ETL welcomes people from all over the world. I'm sure there's plenty of people online watching us from around the world. How would you say the digital revolution has made global events the same? And also, do you have to consider kind of regional nuances in planning your event?
So Emerald Exhibitions actually did a really interesting thing with their ASD show, okay, which is like their target audience are like mom and pop, souvenir shops and things like that, right? But they actually then took the show to their audience, and they did a road show, and they brought their sponsors with them. So I think from a regional standpoint, there's a lot of innovation that can be done, and also it's an exciting revenue stream, because all of a sudden you're saying, hey, you want to do our 6 events that we're holding in all these cities versus 1? So yeah, I think that absolutely regional has a place, and it's more important. But I think global, we all need to get back together, right? We don't live in silos. We don't live, it just, the global connections must take place again.
I was going to add that really the marketplace, even though it's been a global marketplace all along, though, but when it was so face-to-face oriented, there were big costs, right, in doing that, right? So a lot of those costs and barriers have gone away, and so the marketplace really just got a lot bigger. So there's a lot of opportunity. Now, I'm sure there are nuances into effectively attracting that in each region. I'm not personally familiar with that, but I think that's part of the leadership thing, right? If the leadership within these organizations has to understand it's a new marketplace to come at, right? And they have to know how to do that.
Amazing. I've got a question, if I may. So you've obviously been operating in this digital space, which has accelerated so much over the last sort of 18 months. Of the clients that you've dealt with, or events that you've attended even, who's nailing it? And why do you think they're doing such a great job? Who's really doing a great job of delivering virtual?
Virtual?
Virtual or digital or hybrid, just something that stands out for you, and what's made those events really special?
I don't know if you want me to answer that one. Want to go, Brian?
No, I think, so my focus has primarily been, how I would answer that is, are there groups out there that are really doing well on the data side? They are. They're few and far between. They've been investing in it heavily for at least the last 3 to 5 years, because it takes time to wrangle that beast in, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to call out any names, but they are few and far between. Most of the time, right, organizations just aren't willing to do that investment, even though it's that necessary.
Anyone who does virtual, they have a trade show floor virtually or a virtual booth, there's no such thing, just so we're all clear, right? Does not exist. Everyone who thinks like, oh, let me just go add matchmaking and meetings to my program, and does not have a strategy about how to make that work virtually, is just going to fail. And what has happened is, and this is actually bad, so many events were handled poorly virtually that sponsors have a bad taste in their mouth. The audience, like, it really has hurt what could have been or should be a really exciting new medium for engagement.
Okay, amazing. And we've asked everyone who's been on the Orange stage with us over the last couple of days what the future looks like, what the developments are in terms of, and we started by saying in the next 3 to 5 years, and all of a sudden that seemed like a decades used to feel. So maybe in the next 18 months, what do you think are the real trends that we're likely to see in digital event delivery?
I think overall, for the success of the industry, the winners are going to be the ones who build community, deliver value 365, 247, who have buyer-seller marketplaces online, and who are smart enough to realize that all of those things that they're doing digitally helps not just them with revenue, it helps them if they're using the data with, like, who do we go after based on our behavior on our website for this event? Or if I have a hosted buyer program and I know that this sponsor wants these kinds of things, how do I mine my database to go after those people? Those are going to be the winners.
So I think one little prediction I'll make, and this is basically primarily looking at the US-based trade association model with all of the exhibitions over there. They've kind of had a monopoly, if you will, in their space since everything was face-to-face oriented. Now that it's gone so digital, right? And the industries outside of that space have understand what opportunities are there. There's more money being poured into event tech in the U.S. on that side now. Where we're counting it in hundreds of millions of dollars. That's never happened in the past of this industry. That's going to be very, very disruptive. And I think that within 2 to 3 to 4 years, the people that are actually running and putting on the events is going to change drastically.
Absolutely. And actually, one other prediction I have is there's going to be a major consolidation in the event tech space. There's just too many players out there right now. You also have a lot of hungry VCs. Hoppin', anyone? So I think that it's kind of like the mobile apps. When there were so many of them, now there's, 4?
Right.
Perfect, amazing. And that brings us wonderfully to the end of our allocated slot on the orange stage. So thank you very much to the people in the room. Thank you very much to the people at home who've been watching. It's been an amazing session, as I predicted it would be. I hope everyone here enjoys the rest of ETL 21. And finally, thank you very much to Heather and Brian for a fantastic session. Thank you.
Thank you.